The room is eerily still, yet my mind spins like the stripes of a barber's pole. My brain pulsates and every vessel twists. Something is scraping the wrinkles in my brain as if a mini person is going at it with a tiny rake. Why is it that long COVID is so much different to other illnesses?
Gosh, I remember writing that. What was it, 4 years ago now? Yeah, my long COVID was so neurological, which is, yeah. So that's why I wrote that when, I published it. Why is it different to other illnesses? I don't know if I can speak to that, given I've only suffered with long COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a profound arrogance about health before long COVID. I remember at university, so I was 26 when I caught long COVID, and I remember all through university, I would often meet people who had chronic illnesses. And I met one girl who had Crohn's disease. And she was explaining that she couldn't come to the party because she was so fatigued. And I remember my eyes sort of semi-glazing over because I just thought, you need to do some yoga and eat organic. That's, And then I got long COVID and I realised how susceptible we are to a virus that can just change our life entirely. So I don't know how it's different to other illnesses. I've never had another illness, but I know it was hell, the experience I had. Yeah. And now I have no health arrogance and I'm, far more compassionate.
I think this is very commonplace with many people who have that experience, especially me as well. At the time, 22-year-old. I actually remember my mum. My mum actually said to me about it before. She said, "Oh, have you not seen about this long COVID stuff?" And I was like, "Mum, come on,
can't be me.
Come on, that's for old people. That's for people who are out of shape. That's never going to happen to me." So, I think when it hits you and you have that kind of that shock to the system, that realization that you are maybe not as invincible as once thought, is quite a scary realization. But
terrifying, yeah.
Very much so.
And then that extends forever.
For sure.
Because we're meant to feel physically invulnerable, especially as, teens, early 20s. That's sort of a rite of passage.
Yeah.
And I know that's stupid to say because a lot of people much younger than we were get struck down with illness. Yeah, you want to feel invincible and then for that to be taken away. And for it not to be taken away for your peers, there's suddenly this huge divide between our ability to relate to our friends or partners or family and a lack of understanding. So you just, gaslit, not believed.
So take us back to, because obviously 2020, very early days, early on into the pandemic. Talk about your initial experience with that then, because obviously you come down with this with COVID. Talk us through how that then developed into realizing it was something more, and then a little bit about your experience with both the healthcare system and how it was received in terms of the information that was available to you at that time.
Yeah, sure. So I caught COVID March 2020. I was living in Scotland at the time, but I went back to New Zealand and I was able to get a positive test because New Zealand was one of the first countries that were doing PCR tests. If I'd remained in Scotland, I would never have had a confirmation that I was positive. Yeah, tested positive March 22nd. And I just knew I didn't need the test. I said, this is so vastly different to any illness I've had. Immediately it was neurological, like the dizziness, the brain pulsations, had raging fever. It just felt very different. Anyway, I was isolated in my parents' basement. It's not as grim as it sounds. It was like it was a carport that was, do you know carport, the word?
No.
Oh, okay,
no.
like a garage.
Okay,
but it was converted into like a loft-like basement. Okay. So it was fine.
So it's not like this, I have an image of a grimy underground basement.
No, it wasn't. I had doors and a tiny little outside deck, but I was there for 5 weeks. I didn't leave that room for 5 weeks. Anyway, so I tested positive, and what can you do but write it out?
Yeah.
You know nothing. No one can help you. No one can say anything. And what was so bizarre about it, and still to this day, the symptoms didn't just change week by week, day by day. We're talking hour by hour. You know, I would wake up with a fever, then that would go, and the next hour I'd have a sore throat. Then a few hours later, that would go, and then I would have intense dizziness. I would lie down, then, you know, 2 hours later, a new symptom would kick off, heart palpitations. So for it to change that rapidly in the span of hours is very unnerving. And it was like that for 11 days. And then I woke up and I was fine. And I thought, I have cracked. This is what
Happy
they tell.
days.
This is what they say. They say young people, you know, 2 weeks of illness and then you'll recover. It's mild for young people. And I thought, okay, I've got there. But at that time, we weren't allowed out of isolation in New Zealand until we were totally symptom free. And I still had no sense of smell. And they were classifying that as an ongoing symptom. So I had to remain in isolation.
I remember it was strict actually in New Zealand, wasn't it? It was very strict. Yeah.
You had to be completely symptom free.
Okay.
If we still stuck to that, I'd be in isolation. I'd get no smell back. But anyway, that was how it was. So, and then for 3 days, I felt fine. I was reading. Started a bit of exercise. I was trying to learn to do headstands. And then 3 days later, all the symptoms came rushing back. And I thought, something is not right. This is so bizarre. And then it was like that for about a year, where I'd have all these symptoms. They would alleviate. I'd be okay for a couple days, and then I would relapse, and they'd come back with a vengeance.
Was something triggering it? Was it something that you were doing? Because I know you mentioned exercise and
I was so the first time, I
Okay.
did like headstands. I was trying to crack that, so it could be that, right? But then thereafter, I was pretty cautious. I wasn't one of these people that was trying to push through with exercise.
Okay.
So I didn't exercise. Walking could have done it. I would go for like 20-minute walks, and perhaps that was enough to trigger. I do remember once, probably my worst relapse before I recovered. I went for an hour walk. So that could have been it. But yeah, I was also trying to qualify for a lawyer at the time, so I was doing odd study. That could be enough. We know now any sort of work could trigger a relapse. But
yeah, that's the strange thing. It's not necessarily just physical exertion, but also the mental exertion as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of, because obviously now, even though there's still not that great degree of awareness even within the healthcare system, and we're 4 years on now, right? So if we look retrospectively to 2020, how was I'm presuming you went to the doctor and you had an experience with the medical system. How was your experience with that, and what were you told?
Yeah, so my doctor was actually pretty decent because I was like a little guinea pig for her. I was one of the only cases in New Zealand, and she was like,
she must have been rubbing her hands. She was like,
yeah, she was like, so she actually said, here's my personal phone number, call me anytime. I didn't have to traipse into the doctor. So I was on the phone to her a lot, and I distinctly remember after about 6 weeks I said, I'm not getting better. This is really strange. These symptoms are odd, they're unnerving, and the neurological side is it's sinister. That's all. That was the feeling. It was sinister. And I said, what can I do? And she said, well, listen, you need to start walking, because I can't think of any illness in the world that doesn't benefit from walking. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, that's true. You know, how could walking?
Yeah.
It's just walking, and that walking. Nature, walking. So that was her level of understanding. And outside of that, what can she say? She said, take paracetamol, drink water, eat healthy. And there was one moment, it was at the 4-month mark, where I started to go numb in different parts of my body. And I was considering waiting in the morning to go to the doctor, but then purely to just cut through the red tape and get seen immediately, my sister-in-law suggested just go to A&E. You'll just get seen, right, So I did, and I had a awful doctor. I was explaining my symptoms, and she said, well, you walked in here, you can walk out. There's nothing wrong with you. All your blood tests are fine. You need to leave. And her manner was arrogant and awful. but I can also understand. I also have slight, which is probably different to other people. I also have slight empathy for people, for doctors or the medical, because they see so many people. They can't, you know what I mean? They don't know. They don't all have their specialty, especially in A&E. So, yeah, they couldn't have given me the time to do a thorough check, because we don't know. I don't know what I'm looking for. They don't know. We know now the tests you semi-need to do, and regular blood tests don't show anything with long COVID. We need those microclots tests. So,
and they see a lot of this stuff as well. They see a lot of people
exaggerating.
Exactly. You go into A&E and you see people who have fallen over and scraped their knee. So they are in a really difficult position where and also with the need to try and get people through and try and ease the pressure. They're in no choice but to try and
chronic illness is, I mean, it's always been left behind, and we know Western medicine isn't great with it. Yeah, we know that from history. It's not taken so seriously. So, yeah, it wasn't good, but like, I'm not traumatized by that experience. It's just, it is what it is. I didn't die. I recovered. Yeah. There are people in had a lot worse long COVID than me. So this is also my point. It was hell for me. But I still say I had a mild long COVID. Compared to what I know other people suffer, which is inability to even shower unaided. I had a mild long COVID. And for it to have this effect on me and be that traumatic,
So talk about then, because it's so empowering and enjoyable to speak to people who have been through and come out the other side, because I see it through the Facebook groups, you see it through Twitter threads. People are searching and clinging for that one person who did something, and that person, you know, they'll be showered and inundated with messages of like, how did you do it? Tell us your secret. Tell us how you did it. So maybe you could give us an idea of how that progressed through your long COVID journey, and then how you kind of came.
You mean how my recovery?
Exactly. How you ended up to your recovery.
Yeah. So I mean, I can only say I recovered retrospectively, just by virtue of the fact that I stopped relapsing.
Yes.
Because I did have periods where I felt okay during my long COVID journey. You know. So yeah, I caught it March 2020, and I say I recovered by November 2020. Okay. But then I still gave myself a couple of months just to really make sure. And I waited a year until I started any form of exercise. So a full year. And I remember sort of a light bulb moment where I really registered I recovered. And I was speaking to someone in the Netherlands who had experience with post-viral issues, and he'd sort of be a semi-mentor throughout my long COVID journey. And I was also going through a breakup at the end of my long COVID journey. And I remember speaking to this Dutch friend, and I said, it sucks, like I'm unwell and I'm heartbroken. And he said, congratulations, that means you've recovered. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, a healthy person wants 1,000 things, but a sick person wants just one thing. Yeah. And then I was like, oh, you know, if I even could contemplate heartbreak and be hurt by these other things, you know, because it is right, when you're unwell, you're like, health, health, health. I don't really care about anything else. So I think that was like a light bulb moment where I was like, no, I can contemplate other things aside from just trying to get well. So I think that, and coupled with retrospect, which is I stopped relapsing and I was able to just pick up work more gradually, and it's been 4 years and I am yet to be reinfected. But yeah, I've been recovered for the last 3 years. That is so good to hear. Yeah. And in terms of lucky. And yeah, that's what I say. Sorry, you say what I did. Yeah. What are some or some of the things that you look back, even though you might say luck and so on, what, looking back, were some things that you do think either aided or helped in terms of allowing your body to settle and allowing maybe that luck to take place? But if you had to kind of look back and say that was something that definitely helped me.
even if it's just as simple as rest and no exercise.
I mean, yeah, I do say it's luck. I don't know why I recovered and other people don't, because I know they do the exact same things as me and they don't recover. So I do just say I got lucky. But also being able to live rent-free at my parents' home. I can't imagine when you have financial stress, how much that would affect your ability to recover. I had none of that. My parents looked after me. They made me meals. They paid for everything. What greater privilege in order to recover, you know? And I could rest. I rested whenever I wanted. I rested. You know, if I did, you know, go and meet a friend and then it got too much, they would come and pick me up. I didn't have any, you know, I didn't have to do anything alone. I had their like undivided support throughout that entire year. And not only that, their, you know, practical support, emotional support. They never once disbelieved me, ever. Which I know I got thousands, hundreds of messages from people. Saying my loved ones don't believe me. It's hellish. I have to live within four walls with people who are gaslighting me and think I'm making it up. I can't imagine the impact that would have. And I didn't have that. So rest, undivided support, and no practical like complications such as financial stress.
So with some of these like neurological issues, then, so you obviously mentioned this brain fog, this depersonalization.
Yeah, I say brain damage.
Brain damage.
Because brain fog, everyone's like, oh, you're a little bit. That was brain damage.
Yeah.
And I'm going to call it what it is. It was not a fog. It was full on, like, dementia-like symptoms.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think you exaggerate when one says, okay, I feel genuinely dementia or concussed like, and it's no exaggeration, because brain fog or feeling a bit foggy, I've had that prior, when you know when you haven't eaten, you haven't slept so well, maybe you've had a few drinks the night before, I feel a bit foggy. I'm like, that is a crystal clear bliss compared to anything.
Beautiful. Give it, 100%.
But in terms of then the neurological kind of issues that you were having, and in terms of I'm quite interested in how you were approaching that resting period, because obviously you mentioned that you had the support of your family, you were going out and having some connection with friends. In terms of exercise and also mental stimulation, so mental work or whatever, what did your sort of routine look like? Were you doing a little bit of work here and there? Were you doing a bit of meeting people, a little bit of yoga? How did your kind of routine look like?
I didn't have a routine. Okay. I just really did what my body... I was living quite intuitively. If I wanted to sleep in, I did. If I woke early, I did. I didn't devise any routine. I didn't do any exercise, apart from when I learned it triggered the first relapse. When I was trying to do headstands, I learned quite quickly exercise is probably not good for this. I was trying to qualify as a lawyer, so I was sitting the bar. But I pulled out after about 3 months of trying, because I would sit there in the lectures and I'd just be crying. I would turn that Zoom camera off and I'd just be bawling, because I would have these neurological symptoms, the dizziness. It was like the brain flipping. It was, I don't know, if someone could flip your brain, which is why I say in the quote you started off with, like, my mind spins like the stripes of a barber pole. It was just so like that, and as if someone was scraping the wrinkles in my brain. And so I pulled out of the bar, or delayed it, and they were super understanding. They said, that's fine, you just pick it up. So I did try and push through a little bit with the bar, like initially the first few months, and then I stopped it all. So I had no routine, and I just hung with my parents.
Quality time. I bet they were happy in some ways. They
weren't. So my parents are... It's amazing, because it actually taught me a lot about parenting too. And I was always like, empathy's such a... so good to have, and I change it now. I actually don't think empathy is, I think compassion is. Because overly empathetic parents, I think they get involved in their child's emotion and their child's trauma. And I do not think that is helpful. The best thing my parents gave me was a listening ear, undivided compassion, but they never exacerbated my grief and emotion by getting caught up in it. Yeah. And so it was quality time, and it was, I know behind closed doors, hellish for them to see their 26-year-old daughter suffering without any clue of recovery. But they were amazing. Yeah.
I very much feel empathy for and sympathy for the parents. I see the long COVID kids groups where they have kids who are 13, 14 and suddenly bedbound, unable to do anything, and the parents are like, what do I do? What is the route forward? And then that's why you see so many of them advocating on their behalf. And that's something I'd like to come to now, because obviously this experience had a profound impact on you, right? And you, despite recovering, you still have continued to want to be involved and want to advocate and want to push forward in terms of helping other people that are suffering. So can you tell us a little bit about the kind of advocacy and why that's been something that is so important for you, even these 3 years on?
Absolutely. I just started advocating the first 2 months that I knew. We didn't know it was long COVID, but I knew COVID was probably more serious than they were saying, especially for young people. We knew that older people had to take care. That's what they were saying. But they never admitted that young people might have to. So for the first couple of months, I wrote that article, I think it was 4 months in, and that was published in one of New Zealand's media outlets, The Spin-Off. And then I was doing media interviews. It was just a natural instinct for me to warn other people that you might have a mild case, but can also go this way. And I just continued that, especially now when we got science on our side. And it's now we have all the science proving that long COVID is real, it's not going away, and people aren't safe if they are okay after their first or second infection. They can develop long COVID on their third, fourth, fifth. So to me, as long as the world's operating back to normal and COVID is out there, people can get long COVID, and we should be being warned. And so until that happens, and until we stop the propaganda, which is COVID is mild, you're fine, the flu is worse, I will continue advocating. So in New Zealand, I started the first New Zealand long COVID support group, and then there was another wonderful advocate, Janine Crossan, and her and I did the bulk of media interviews throughout 2020, 2021, and then both of us founded Long COVID Support Aotearoa, which is now a website in New Zealand, and
Okay. So what is the aim for you now with the advocacy work? Because obviously you mentioned about the people being aware of the risks around it. Are you working with raising awareness for that with other kind of viral conditions, or what's the purpose with this going forward? Are you trying to make sure that the science is there's not this dissonance between the science and public perception? What is the kind of aim that you want to come from that?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, if you're going to make a decision, I think people deserve the right to be informed about that decision. And a decision to me is constant, having exposure to a virus which can disable you potentially for years, if not the rest of your life. People should have complete choice about whether they do that, but I think they deserve the information. And as it currently stands, a lot of medical professionals, governments, they're not warning people. And in fact, they're doing the opposite, which is minimizing the condition itself. So what I want is people to be aware of the science, which is you can get long COVID and what long COVID is. And it's not just a little cough that continues. It is, it can affect every organ in your body. And we still do not know the long-term effects of it. We're 4 years in. If we look at other viruses, it can take decades for the impact to show, such as polio, you know. It took a long time for HIV to develop into AIDS. We don't know where this is going. So I think we must be transparent about the price we're paying.
How do we balance this with, because obviously we can't, there's other viruses that trigger a similar kind of reaction as well. So glandular fever can very often turn into not again relatively small percentage, but it can result in chronic fatigue syndrome, which is again very similar. In my opinion, essentially the same as kind of a longer term long COVID. Other illnesses as well, other bacterial, other viral illnesses as well. Do you think the priority should be maybe also more around why this happens in certain, and finding out why this happens in certain individual cases? Because we're never going to be able to rid the world of viruses. That is something that inevitably they will continue, and we can't not live lives. But do you think there needs to be a greater focus on what is this triggering in certain individuals and why this is the case, and then we can mitigate a bit against that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, there's a multitude of post-viral complications, and we need to be looking at all of them. And in my advocacy work, I mean, I am focused on long COVID, but the hopes is that when we raise awareness for long COVID, and then we put money into like clinical trials, and we can come up with potential biomarkers and treatments, then you can extend that to other viruses. You know, I think we need to take a much more serious look at how we treat chronic illness, and that includes them all. It isn't taken that seriously, but we know chronic illness is on the rise. And as you said, ME, CFS, that's existed for decades, and it's a travesty. It is still mocked and disbelieved. And I didn't, like I said, I had arrogance before long COVID, so I don't think I even had heard of ME, which is crazy given how many people suffer with it. And now, you know, I hear a lot of people with it, and a lot of people in my long COVID community have ME. Yeah. So absolutely, with my advocacy, I include ME and CFS in that. I
think there's a bit of an issue with, especially during the time with the messaging, right? Because obviously for a young person, your percentage chance of dying or being seriously acutely ill with COVID is, to be honest, relatively negligible. That's something that when you say, okay, 0. whatever percent, that isn't really something that personally I didn't care. I was like realistically that is a very relatively small percentage. But if you knew what the 5% chance or whatever percent chance it is of developing into long COVID, which is, as you mentioned, not simply a cough for a few months, but something that would profoundly change your life. Imagine saying to somebody, there is a 5% chance that you will never exercise in the same way again. Be like, what? What do you mean? Like, that is obviously, those sort of percentages are of greater concern to somebody than this messaging about, well, your the fatality rate, etc. Because the impact there is not necessarily perceived the same way. And I think there's still this kind of dissonance, and part of it I think also comes from how long COVID was being measured, or is still being measured as well, because we spoke about this beforehand, and the WHO described long COVID as symptoms existing for more than 3 months. And you have the description of chronic fatigue syndrome, which is symptoms following a viral or stressor or something along those lines in a similar way, but lasting more than 6 months, which is becoming chronic. And I think it has been quite unhelpful having this discrepancy, because then long COVID can often be conflated with a kind of normal post-viral fatigue. And post-viral fatigue is something that I've experienced. It's something that is relatively normal following certain viral illnesses, but it's profoundly different to what you experience when you have long COVID or chronic fatigue. There's very much a difference between having a few months of feeling generally tired and generally lethargic to having something that is profoundly and biologically off with how your body is functioning and having an allergic reaction to exercise, having general neurological symptoms and inability to think your thoughts. So I found that messaging a bit confusing, and almost it reduced the level of awareness. So I wondered what your thoughts were between this dissonance between science and the public perception.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I mean, that's coming up with a definition for a new disease is challenging because, you know, what symptoms do you take on?
Yeah.
I mean, if you considered, you know, people who had myocarditis from long COVID, and that was your definition for long COVID, you would have a different percentage to if you took people who have continued loss of smell. So what symptoms do you take on board? For what length? That's and obviously WHO came up with this anything after the acute infection, 12 weeks plus. But it is challenging. And there's also, but there's also people who, I know people with long COVID, they're okay for about 4 months, and then their long COVID hits at month 5. So would they include, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a huge discrepancy between, what. But I think that's why advocacy is important, and that's why research is important, so we can try and find a biomarker to say, no, this is why. And I think microclots do that a lot. We know people with long COVID have microclots, which starves their body of oxygen, which also shows why it can affect so many different organs, because there's microclots. But I think that's important, which is why it's important to continue advocacy, continue raising funding so scientists can keep researching potential reasons for long COVID, why some people get it, why some people don't, why some people recover, others don't, and then we can look for treatments.
I think the biomarker thing is incredibly important.
Vital,
I spoke a few days ago to one of the researchers from Imperial who did this new study, and they were looking into the protein dysregulation, or there was a discrepancy within the proteins in the immune system that was very much correlated with which subset and which phenotype of symptoms you're experiencing, whether it be GI, whether it be respiratory, or whether it be the neurological. And they mapped that onto the biomarkers that they were seeing within their blood. And I think that's a huge step in getting to the point where we can then, rather than having this kind of process of elimination in order to get a diagnosis, which I think in many ways often it then kind of skews the actual numbers, and it skews, okay, like what are you actually experiencing? It skews as to whether you're actually confusing an issue with maybe another disease. But having these sort of biomarkers will be able to tell us, okay, this is what we can see. We can clearly map this onto your symptoms and what we're then seeing within the blood. And that will help us to get a good idea of like how many people are actually experiencing that, what that actually looks like and what that means, and then also help us to develop treatments.
Absolutely.
And one of the key things for drug companies or for any kind of clinical trial, whether it be repurposing or new drugs, is having a set biomarker that we can look at and say, okay, the aim of this trial is to reduce the levels of X biomarker, whether it be a protein or levels of something else in the blood. That is the important thing, because otherwise we're just kind of like throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks and saying, okay, try this. Do you feel better? Yeah, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe it's placebo. And I think that's going to be one of the key things for us going forward as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And just on that note, my bloods were taken at month 5 of my long COVID, and they were sent to a lab at the University of Otago, and they tested it, people with long COVID's blood compared to controls, and it was very clear. It's only just got the results about 2 months ago. Yeah. Very clear. Full of microclots. Your blood was not functioning the same as the control. And it's also, so that's nice to have, to know that when I did have long COVID, that my blood, there was some reason.
That gives you a little bit of
it gives me a retort to people who are like, what was it?
Yes.
Anxiety?
Yeah,
I said, but my bloods were taken. But then also that's a complication in and of itself, because what I've also learned through advocacy is you can't speak facts to people who want to remain willfully blind. If anything, it just hardens their position. So I can say these things, but people do not want to acknowledge the gravity of long COVID or even consider it could happen to them. So that is a purely, like science communication. How do you overcome that as an advocate, which is really important. Yeah, that's like whole psychology. Yeah, if anyone's got any tips. Because that's, there, like you said, the cognitive dissonance in society at the moment. I mean, we're sounding the alarm, but willful blindness is a real thing.
How much of that do you think is due to this kind of anti-establishment sort of rhetoric that we have at the moment? Because obviously you see tons of this on Twitter, and especially over the course of the pandemic, there were many reasons, in fact, as to why you would hesitate to trust the establishments. You see the parties going on in Downing Street. You see these kind of things. There was so much sort of questioning around motives around pharmaceutical companies, and there's been this lack of trust there as well. So how much do you think that an unwillingness to speak about, or not even necessarily sound the alarm, just a willingness to acknowledge that there is an issue, and then a decision to say, okay, this is going to have an impact in our economy, as we're already seeing. It's going to have an impact on the number of people out on disability. So we need to do something. We need to invest in this because it makes sense, not just from a sympathy point of view, but from an economic point of view as well. How much of this unwillingness to do so do you think comes from the result of this anti-establishment rhetoric and this unwillingness to speak about COVID? We don't want to speak about that. That was something that happened over there, and we'd rather that just totally behind us.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. But I think it's probably a mixture of different things. It's a mixture of believing the propaganda that COVID is mild. If you're vaccinated, you don't even need to bat an eyelid when you get it. It's the fact that they dropped all mitigations, including isolation for positive cases. So if it was really that bad, they wouldn't do that. So this trust for the decisions, but also mistrust, like you said, there was a huge rise in sort of anti-establishment through the pandemic. But also I just think it's human nature to want to move on. They don't want to talk about it anymore. I mean, we know willful blindness is a real thing. I always am struck, there was this case in America, it was in the small town called Libby, Montana, and there was this toxic asbestos called vermiculite, and it was spread all they used it as fertilizer, they used it in buildings, and this lady, I think I'm getting her name right, Gayla Bennyfield, made a connection between thousands of premature deaths in this town, and she discovered it was vermiculite, and she was trying to sound the alarm for years, and no one would listen. And she had proof, strong connection proof, that it was this vermiculite, toxic asbestos. And they said to her, if it was really that dangerous, someone would have warned us. And I think it's similar to now the cognitive dissonance we have around COVID. If it was really dangerous, the government would have warned us. Come on, we wouldn't just be back to normal. But what they don't know is that a lot of the people in power have the protections that we deserve. Westminster, they've got high-grade HEPA filters in there. They clean the air. We know that. So they're just walking around in their offices with clean air, which is what a lot of us are lobbying for. We need to clean the air. COVID is airborne. A lot of people still don't know. So I think there's a mixture, They want to move on. They can't be bothered speaking about COVID. I'm bored of it. I wish there was something else. I'm so bored of it. What a boring topic. If you could say to your 30, what am I going to speak about when I'm 30 years old? I wouldn't choose a virus. So I get it. I get that. Yeah, so bored. They want to move on. They want to revert to 2019. So let's ignore, the huge rise in unemployment and the fact that I have a 100-day cough and I wonder what that's from, or I'm sick more than normal. Let's ignore all of that. Let's ignore the huge rise in heart attacks in young people. That might be lockdown stress, right? And if I said, they probably think if it was as dangerous as you're saying, we would have been warned. But that's not how it works. Yeah,
I think it's tricky because I think a lot of it is just a lack of awareness. I think for me, I don't think it's like an intentional. I think there's also so many things that are going on in the world. There's so many
100%.
many things that are of an issue, and this is why I often stress that. Because for me, I don't care about sympathy. I don't want people to be like, I recognise. I don't give a shit. I honestly just couldn't care less. I just want to get the selfish. I just want to be feeling 100% and train all the time. That's what I want, and I want other people to have the same. So I don't really give a shit about this like just totally awareness type thing. But what I want is there to be an acknowledgement that there should be funding going into this, and that's why I always propose the route of taking an economic approach, because as much as sympathy only goes so far, and I say this all the time, that you see people are suffering, and you see people suffering, and it's obviously sad, but then eventually when you hear about people suffering and saying and speaking about it so much, people become turned off from it almost. Whereas if you talk about the economic impact and you say, look, this is the situation that we have X amount of people who are out of work, we have X amount of people who are going to be out of work and not able to contribute to the economy, and this is going to have this effect on the society in X many years, then we can get to a position where we say, okay, what are we going to do about that? And then we can propose, okay, so if we invest this amount into this many research projects, we will likely find something that will improve the quality of life to the point where this many people can get back into work and get back contributing to the economy and having a good quality of life again. And I think that is such a more positive route to go down, and also a more effective route, because I think then people will resonate with that. People numbers.
Capitalism.
People like numbers. Like it, and then it's something that you
can
quantify.
Yeah,
exactly,
it's not
exactly.
like an individual case. Yeah, you
exactly,
can quantify
for sure.
100%. And I think that's one way. Look at the economy, which is very legitimate and important, and persuasive to governments, to businesses. You want your economy going.
Yes.
You need to solve long COVID. That is, But another way is also just individually. I mean, we're obsessed with health and wellness, and if we can also, there's the economy side, but also say COVID does damage your health, whether you get long COVID or not. Your IQ, we know now, dramatically decreases when you get COVID, whether you got long COVID or not. You get dumber. Your brain, there's brain damage, an increase in grey matter, or your risk of heart attacks does increase every time we can also quantify it like this, and whether that falls on deaf ears or not, we can't do anything. You can lead a horse to water, right? But can't make it drink.
It's quite a good point, actually, because I think we are very health conscious and have become, in many ways, I think, overly health conscious about every tiny little thing now. You think about the decline in rates of young people drinking and smoking. You see how many people have a Fitbit, how many people have their like protein bar, their athletic greens, all of this kind of stuff. So I think that's actually quite a good point, and maybe something you can kind of tap into about.
Yeah, I think it's important.
I
mean, we're all willing to take the right supplements and
exactly.
do the right exercise and spend thousands on retreats or skincare and all of this, and all of that's fine. That's a choice, but also one COVID infection could age you multiple years. So what's the point in doing all of that if this is going to happen? And I understand we can't shield completely from it.
Yeah,
we're going to be exposed. It is. But we should be aware of the implications on the body. That's just, like we are with a lot of other things. If you're going to enter into something risky, I mean, when you go to like a construction site, you're not going on without personal protective gear. You're not getting on that site. So to me, understanding about a virus, it's just education. We do that with a lot of areas in our life. STDs, we educated for years about that. Wear a condom. It's, you know what I mean? It's it's still your choice to engage in an act, but have some awareness around what you're risking.
Yes.
That's all I want about your health and the economy.
Yes, I think I see what you mean, because I think a lot of people's fear, especially libertarians, would be the fear of reverting back to certain forcing in. Yeah, exactly. Which I think often when people hear what people are saying around the risks, etc., they maybe instinctively, especially because of this lack of trust and this sort of rejection 100%. For what happened before. No, we don't want to be going back. And I'm one of those people. I very much don't want to be. I want everything to revert to normal. At the end of the day, there are things out there, but I think what you're saying is perfectly correct, and that to be aware of the risks and be aware of what happens, so that then you can make educated choices and at least have that kind of knowledge, whilst also at the same time having that funding and the research going on into, okay, what are some things that we can do to mitigate people's risk, and how can we actually develop treatments as well going forward?
Absolutely. So that's it. Yeah, we need to pump money and funding into long COVID treatments, finding cures. But the other side of that, which is I know a lot of advocates, and let me be clear, no one I know wants to revert.
Yes.
Which is, we sometimes get pinned that you just want lockdowns, you want us all. No one.
No.
Boring. No, thank you. We need to move forward. But we have to move forward with a plan, and a lot of us advocates, that plan is clean the air. The way we cleaned the water for cholera, let's clean the air for airborne viruses. And as I mentioned earlier, those in power do it. Westminster, HEPA filters, their air is clean. We need to be doing that in schools. We know a huge amount of COVID transmission comes from schools. Kids are vulnerable. We do not know what's going to happen to people who have COVID in years' time. Clean the air. This is what we want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very, very good. Okay, so in terms of what's next for you, I'd like to go over the long COVID support project. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name. Because, I will butcher that massively. But what's next for the project that you're working on, and for you in general?
The long COVID support Aotearoa.
Yes.
So we've launched a registry which aims to capture data from the New Zealand public to quantify the burden of long COVID.
Okay.
Because in order to raise money, we need to prove this is the burden. So that's what the registry is doing, and that's ongoing at the moment. And once we do that, we're going to then look at treatments and how we can support people with long COVID, whether that be financially or, So that's what's next for that project. And as for me, who knows? I will continue advocacy till there is a cure for long COVID. I will be continuing, much to probably a lot of people's dismay. They're sick of it. But yeah, and then I've just recently moved to London, looking for work.
Exciting.
Want to do like an advocacy role that's paid.
Yes.
Not just,
yeah.
But I love advocacy. So if there's some sort of and I have a law background. So if I can combine my law background, journalism, and advocacy, that's the dream.
Is this you putting out an online CV?
Exactly.
Okay,
everyone.
Yes, I see.
Contact.
Just quickly, in terms of on the project then, so you're doing this registry to try and quantify the issue, right? And then from that, you're trying to raise money from where? From the government?
Well, we have government funding, which is why we were able to launch the registry in collaboration with the University of Auckland. And I can't say so much about what's going to happen after, but that we do have funding from the government.
Okay, that's exciting.
And we work with scientists and like immunologists and research fellows at University of Auckland to build this registry and keep the website running. Okay,
and then you're looking to use that money to invest in helping people, treatments, different research projects.
Once we've quantified the burden, there's a lot of people out of the workforce that need treatments, help with, doctors. So we're looking to branch out into that avenue and how we can provide support across the financial, medical support, but through this long COVID support Aotearoa charity.
Again, I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but thank you. Thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for joining us today.
That was fun. Thank you.
I will, any links that can point towards the project and work that you're working on. Is there anything you want to mention? I can also obviously put it on the link as well.
It'd be cool if you could link to the Long COVID Support Aotearoa website. It's really well done, so it's a good resource for people. Yeah, if you could provide a link for that. And I speak a little bit about long COVID on my Instagram, so you could include that, but it's also like a load of other stuff. But yeah, I have some of my published writing which about long COVID on there.
Amazing. Freya, thank you so much.
Thank you, Harry.